Hello, everyone. Aw, Glenn, what's with the frown?
I'm going to turn that frown upside down, but then I'll stand on my head so I'll still be frowning. Hey, everyone.
It's LoFi history. No, we're all smiles here today for LoFi history. Welcome, everyone, again. I'm Libba. We've got Glenn and Marie. And if you're just joining us for the first time, in LoFi history, you get to ask history questions from the chat, have them answered live, while I'm back here DJing, making sure we answer your questions. So, yes, that's exactly what I'm doing. How'd you know? It's not just pressing a button anyway. So, I always like to start with what y'all are wearing. So, Marie, I'm particularly interested in your outfit today. So, describe, what are you wearing?
Yeah, so I am farm girl chic today. I have, here, I'll stand up for just a moment so you can see my apron. So this is my apron. It has some holes in it.
Like an apron would.
Like an apron should. So here are some of the holes. Here are some of the spots where it's, these are also holes. They kind of look like shadows. And then I have some more soot down here on my apron. But it protects my dress. See, my dress doesn't have anything on it. It's still nice and blue.
Nothing on it.
That's why we have aprons. So I have a work dress on. That's about mid-Victorian in its style. So it is all one piece. It is nice light blue broadcloth things. I can roll this down and then it just has like a nice little cuff that buttons, but you know, farm girl, you gotta roll up your sleeves.
Yeah. Nice.
Yes, so top bodice is off a little bit on the shoulders. That's stylish for the 1860s, make you look like you have a larger chest, smaller waist. Still, I mean, poor people are also still interested in fashion.
Yes.
I always get upset when they're like, well, the poor people didn't care. I'm like, yes, they care about how they look. They just don't have enough money to like.
Poor person wouldn't wear that. If they could afford it, they would.
They would.
Or if they can't afford the big thing, they
will
will make things
the other thing that they can't afford look fashionable.
Exactly.
They still care about how they look and present themselves. They just might not have as much money to put into it. Here I have one of my fun things. I was like, it's winter. I should do wintry things. And also I just made one of these for a customer. So I was like, I want to go wear mine. I miss mine. And this is a Sontag or a bosom buddy, and it's like a shawl, but it crossbodies. And then here, I'll stand up so you can see the back of it too. So it has the back here, so it goes down, and then it goes up, over, and it has these two pieces that then cross and tie in the back. Sometimes you can like cross them. You can do it various ways. This is the most traditional way.
So bosom buddy is not a period term though, is it?
I don't know.
I can't imagine it would be, but only because of the word buddy, not bosom.
Oh, okay. But I'm like, bosom sounds very Victorian.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Yes.
But it was called a Sontag, named after. So someone actually asked me, like, why is it called a Sontag? I was like, that's a good question. So then I googled it. Yes, I'm like, let me Google that for you. And apparently, it is after a German songstress whose last name was Sontag, and she was the one who popularized the style to the Victorian society, and then it made its way throughout the world. Yes.
Very good.
And also, I have my slat bonnet.
Slap bonnet?
It's a slat bonnet because it has slats that make it stiff
right
here.
Slat. Okay.
Yes. So you can
what?
see it's stiffer up front here, and then it just kind of ties in the back, so I can tie it over my bun. That's here. That's volleyball.
And that is a hardcore working girl's bonnet, right?
It is, because it has this whole shawl thing in the back, so I don't burn my neck and I don't burn my face. Depending on how tight I tie it in the back, I can pull it further or farther out so I don't burn myself.
That is not a social event bonnet. That is a get it done bonnet.
This is a good, and you could wear it to a social event, but it's not like.
It's like overalls at the prom.
Yeah, it would be like that. This is your. I mean, because if you went to an event outside, like a barn raising, this might be appropriate, but like to a ball, no. Not a fancy social
ball.
Event.
And while we have a moment, do let me know how the audio is. It seems a little quiet on my end for some reason, even though settings are all good. But viewers, please let me know if anything is too low, too high. Let us know. And so, Glenn, you've got a pretty interesting hat in particular.
Everyone loves this hat.
Yes, I like it. It is rather flat though. So okay, tell us about this hat you've got.
Well, let me. So this is a coat and hat From the 1830s, U.S. Army regulars would have a coat like this, nice high collar, that might even have a hook and eye to keep it closed up here to keep your chin up. I have opted for the off-duty fatigue style. And, long sleeves, blue wool, white trim, small pewter buttons. It's a very short shell jacket. But this hat, so this was the fatigue hat. And the reenactors, historians call it the pizza pie hat for obvious reasons, right? It's big and it's flat. It's a forage cap. And forage caps mean that you're taking this, and the idea is you're foraging for food. If you want to put some eggs or your bread or your bacon in there, there's a big hatch you can just drop stuff in. This one has a little stiffener around the edge to make it a little more soldierly looking. But of course, that was one of the first things the soldier took out because it kind of made it more difficult to wear. So if I was to take that out, this thing, it gets a lot more floppy, but it also becomes a more practical item for carrying things. And this big leather bill, and it's kind of goofy looking. I mean, it's goofy looking, and it was not popular with the troops until the next model of hat came out. And the next model of hat was made of 100% goat skin, and it was a big, tall thing. And the most attractive part of it, from the officer's perspective, was that it could fold flat and go into your knapsack. And soldiers hated those because, again, it's a shapeless leather bag that you have to stick on your head in the heat of summer when they're in Florida, when they're out in the West and things like that.
It doesn't exactly breathe.
It does not breathe, especially goat skin, right? And so the people who could hold on to their older hats did until they literally fell apart. So they hated this thing until they were given a much less attractive alternative, and then they loved them.
And then you're like, you know what? Maybe that wasn't so bad.
Yeah, exactly. So
that seems to be the story for a lot of fashion trends.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. Or just events.
Yeah, right. Well, thank you. And Brenda says audio's good. I actually figured out my problem. So it was not my fault. So anyway, all good there. So folks, if you have any history questions for us today, feel free to put those in the chat. I've got some to warm us up with some history questions, and also wanted to mention a thank you to the donors for our January donation goal. We had a few people donate outside of when we were live, and I do believe we had Lorraine donate $5, Jim donated $10, and just in case I didn't get to give him a shout out, David, Jean, Karen, Roseanne, History Girls, and an anonymous donation. So thank you all. This is something new. We're trying to just set some monthly donation goals, as many of our digital programs especially are free. We also have digital memberships, if you're not already aware. I know that most of you are probably aware by now.
Right.
And if you'd like to become a member, that's only $3 a month or $35 a year. So a big bargain for members-only programs every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern. And actually, while we're talking about our programs, tomorrow, Glenn, you've got a really cool program coming up, and that is a free live stream for the general public. So what's happening tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern, Glenn?
Yes, so a very fascinating topic, and one that I've loved since childhood, but I didn't know what it was called until I grew to be an adult. I'm going to talk about the history and development, which is incredibly recent, of the story of historic European martial arts. Now, when we think martial arts, we usually think of samurai and karate and jujitsu and ninjas and things like that. We think of the Asian perspective of fighting styles. But obviously, Europe also developed its own warrior aura and practices and traditions and techniques that were taught and developed over time. And so those things happen, and then basically when gunpowder weapons come along, those hand-to-hand styles of fighting from horseback, on foot, with sword and shield and things like that sort of go away. But again, very recently, really the late 90s, people sort of start rediscovering these, and scholars pick up on it, and people begin practicing and seeing if they can figure out and basically reconstruct some of these historic martial arts. And so I'm going to look at the history of that. We're going to look at the way some of the things work, show you some of the fighting styles as we understand them. So I think it's going to be a really, really interesting live stream.
Yeah, that sounds super fun.
Hopefully I'll be able to give you the point of it all.
That was a pun.
That was a pun.
Took me a second.
Yes. It's a little edgy this time
Oh
of day.
my god, save it for tomorrow.
Just get a grip, guys.
Oh my gosh.
I don't want to pommel you to death with it.
All right, we're just ending the stream now. Just kidding.
See you tomorrow.
Now, Marie, you've got a really great members program on Friday about the famous Anne Boleyn.
Yes, so we will be talking about Anne Boleyn and how she kind of helped cause the English Reformation.
So,
How did England become Protestant? Anne Boleyn is the short answer.
Yes.
Come to Friday to find out the long answer.
yeah. So become a
And
member.
she's very excited about it, but I don't want her to lose her head over it.
Oh my gosh. All right, I need to definitely
Isn't
get
it time to ask some questions?
Yes. I definitely need some kind of like Kane graphic, like classic vaudeville thing.
Oh.
We actually do have a question in the chat, so let's get to Susan's question. I'll start a fresh new beat for us. So Susan asks, I've only ever heard of the Underground Railroad going north, but was there one that went from the deep south to Mexico, or did all the enslaved go north? That's a great question. I've never considered that because I've always assumed that the goal was to get to the north, but I guess ultimately the goal is not to be enslaved. So maybe there's other places they went.
Do you want to take this, or you want me to start off?
You can start off. I'll jump in.
So the Underground Railroad, you have to remember, was not a formal thing. It's not like people gave out membership cards. It was not an actual railroad that ran underground.
No. Some people do think that.
Yeah, but it was a name for a disorganized, informal, but remarkably effective system where slaves could escape from their masters and make their way north to the free states. So again, that's sort of the Underground Railroad. Getting to Mexico. Generally speaking, there was the Underground Railroad and the systems they set up generally were for slaves in the deep south to get north. So that was the focus of it. Really, the only people that are going to be able to get to Mexico are slaves that are going to be in Texas. It's just too far to get from the middle of Georgia or the middle of Alabama and go that far through slave territory to get to Mexico, which had outlawed slavery. There was technically, at least legally on paper, no slavery allowed in the nation of Mexico at this time. That's one of the reasons the Texans decided to revolt and leave Mexico and come to the U.S., but that's a whole other story. So not really. There was nothing set up, especially to the scale that there was in the eastern part of the United States, east of the Mississippi River. So that's the quick and dirty answer to your question.
And so Sweet Geek, this is a good question for you, Marie. Sweet Geek. Oh, first of all, thank you, Susan, for your question. That was an excellent question. Sweet Geek asks, why and when did women stop wearing corsets? Great question.
Yes. So that's an interesting question because it's also a very personal choice. It's a clothing choice. Corsets fell out of favor in the 19-teens, so around 1910 in that era, going into the 1920s. And in the 1920s, you have the bra that comes over, or gets invented, really. It kind of starts out as someone sewed two handkerchiefs together and thought oh, this would work to secure my bosom. And then it kind of, people ran with it, and it very much has the same shape that we would consider today. But that doesn't mean that everyone just immediately stopped wearing corsets. My grandma remembers lacing her grandma into a corset in the 1930s. Because that's what she grew up with, that's what she was comfortable with, and that's what she was familiar with and what she wanted to wear. So people continued to wear corsets into the 1930s, into the 40s, maybe even into the 50s. I don't know. It depends on how personal choices. I'm wearing a corset right now, so I guess women never really stopped wearing corsets. But as a fashionable thing, Of course, it's went out of favor around the 19 teens because of the invention of the bra. Also, in the 19 teens, you have a whole load of amount of social change due to World War I, due to the Spanish flu pandemic, due to women getting the right to vote, and with the 19th Amendment, roaring 20s, flappers, social reform, and change going on like nobody's business. And that's when it really stops. And that's because if you look at fashion from like the 19 teens, it's still very more traditional Victorian-like. And then you go into the 1920s, and they have rejected notions of traditional femininity, short hair. Basically, they wanted to look like a boy. They wanted the straight column silhouette. They were not emphasizing feminine curves or long hair or anything of that nature. It was very androgynous, very styled, like you could not tell if they were a man or a woman, based on traditional.
I mean, would you say that this may be stretching it, but a woman in 1910, fashion-wise, could almost fit into the 1860s and 70s, and a woman in the 1920s could almost fit in today?
I think.
Is that a stretch?
That's a little bit of a stretch, but I do think it would work.
Just to show how much change occurred in that one 10-year
period.
Yeah.
Yes. I think a woman who is dressed in the 19 teens, depending on...
I guess I should say 1910. Let me say 1910.
Okay, 1910. I'll give you 1910.
You'll cut that off right
yes,
there.
I think 1910, that's definitely lit.
But
they could go into to mid-Victorian and no one would, people would be like, interesting dress, but no one would be like, oh, no, scandal.
Right.
Versus 1920s where we still see the influence in 1920s fashion. 20s are coming back.
God help us.
Now, do you feel like that fashion change, it seems kind of sudden when you look at the timeline. Was that a uniquely American or Western fashion trend, or like what do you think was the catalyst for it? Was it those big events and just social change might as well change the fashion, and was it just in America or abroad?
Happened in America, happened in Europe. I can't speak for other regions or countries because really it's the 19th Amendment. It's having half the world's population, no, not half, but a very large amount of the world's population die in the pandemic, and then also a very large amount of the world's population dying in World War I, which are really driving these social changing factors. And then when we get the right to vote, they have more legal status. They're going to push the envelope even further, do even more, and the fashion and culture reflects that.
Have there been other times in fashion history where that stark of a change has happened so quickly? I recall you talking about like the column dresses of like Jane Austen era.
Yes, I would say that one. And when you have, it doesn't happen as fast because you don't have as much mass production of garments, but a very dramatic change that happens in not too much amount of time is from the big voluminous Marie Antoinette like skirts to the very column of like the Jane Austen era thing. Jane Austen time period where you go from wanting to be like this rich aristocracy to more of a Greek goddess look because of the massive amounts of revolution that are taking place in America, in France. England is really trying not to have a revolution at that time, and which sparks around the world and ideas of democracy and the Enlightenment, and that's also reflected in the dress as people are going back to these the ideas of democracy, democratic ideals, republics. They're going back to the ideas of Greek and Rome and wanting to incorporate the dress that they see in Greek and Rome into their own dress of the time period as well. So you can see that reflected also in the architecture. You see the Greek revival coming back in architecture as well as in dress. So stylistically, they're harkening back, not just with ideas, but with their surroundings and what they want to put around them and around their bodies.
Yeah, that's actually, I hadn't considered the connection between the fashion and the architecture going back to this Greek
Yeah, this
style.
Federalist period was super that.
And the Federalist period, can you give us a reminder of when that span of time is? Quiz.
Mid 1790s to, would you say, maybe 1820?
Well, are you saying Federalist as in like federal architecture, or are you saying Federalist as like America founding, or Federalist as
goodness.
when the Federalists have power in the U.S.
I would
Senate?
say Federalist architecture.
Yeah.
Okay, Federalist architecture is, I would say, 1790s to 1820s.
Okay.
Cool.
But the Federalists didn't have any real power after
No.
the election of
No.
1800.
Well, excellent. I feel like that would making those connections between like the fashion and style and how the society reflects it in your clothing and architecture. That'd be a fun live stream.
And you have to think, when the United States has just founded a republic, right?
Mm-hmm.
There hadn't, except for a couple of, one-offs in the Netherlands and things like that, there had not been a republic governing a large body of land since ancient Rome.
Mm.
So they were truly hearkening back to that period politically, ideologically, spiritually, and that's reflected in the dress and the politics and the architecture.
Furniture.
And the
Oh, yeah.
and the furniture.
Motifs.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's definitely
fascinating.
some fodder for future programming. And great question, Sweet Geek. Also, JM is here with us. Oh, thank you for sharing the stream. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. So feel free to chat your questions if you're just joining us. Marie and Glenn are here to answer your history questions from the chat. And I've got some questions though that. I thought would be fun. So, one was, we talk about historic movies and historic fiction a fair amount, and I know that Marie in particular, you're a big fan of historic fiction.
I love historical fiction.
If you could produce a movie about a historic figure or event that has not been done yet, or maybe you just want to do it better, what would you choose and why? And I'll switch up the music while y'all are thinking. And also remind our dear viewers that you can donate if you would like to help us reach our January donation goal by going to bit.ly/jangoal. I'm going to throw that into the chat for everyone. So, did y'all think of one?
Yes.
All right, Glenn, you go first.
William the Conqueror and Norman Conquest.
All
The
right.
end. Because no one should be surprised.
Surprised.
But, and I have complained about this multiple times, it is such a and you agree this is a phenomenally important era.
It's a very,
right? It's
very
an important event. Even Liba has been dragged into this over the last year and a half about how fascinating this time period is. It's three kingdoms. It's kingdoms. It's three kings. It's struggle. It's intrigue. It's brothers betraying one another. It's all the things. And no one has made a single motion picture about this that wasn't like some homemade movie that they did on a B-rate, right? No one's done this. No one's done a television miniseries on this. It shatters my belief in reality that no one has done this. So
it really
yes,
does sound like it could be such a like this huge production, kind of going back to the big historic productions of what was it, the 60s when that was been heard.
The cast of thousands.
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
It could be done. Or the one that I thought of is, some of you may have seen that 2-season series of Rome that HBO did.
Yeah.
So good. That's exactly the kind of treatment that story needs. So someone, please do it. You don't even have to involve me. I don't need a dime from this. I just want to be able to watch it.
Now, for people who don't know anything about William the Conqueror or really what you're talking about, so give us the pitch. Why does this historic event or timeline make such a good movie? What happens?
Because it is a fantastic story of 3 different kings vying for the throne of England in the 11th century. In 1 year. In one year they do this. One man comes out on top, but it is not an easy fight. There are at least 3 major battles that the producers can film and direct. There is political intrigue. All these men know each other, or at least know of each other. There are brothers and betrayals involved, and it sets the course of destiny for England starting in the 11th century, sets the course of England's destiny going forward, and even today, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II draws her descent from William the Conqueror.
Wow,
And
I didn't know that.
The kings and queens of England have. That's basically how their rule is legitimate, because they can go all the way back to William the Conqueror, right?
Oh.
From a genealogical standpoint. So it's all wrapped up. It still has modern relevance. It's how we have the language that we speak today, right? As the Norman Conquest took Old English, threw in some French, we end up with Middle English, which immediately goes into Shakespeare, which forsooth we all doth speak most heartily this day. Indeed. So that's obviously I'm very passionate about this. So
JM says, "Don't spoil the ending." Wink.
Everyone dies.
Well, that does sound like I would definitely watch that. I mean, that sounds so fun, and I mean, maybe not fun is the right word, but
Interesting, fascinating.
Fascinating,
Yes.
thrilling, I guess is what
Thrilling.
yeah. Well, awesome. Susan says, I'd watch Glenn's movie about the Norman Conquest, but I hope he'd include the making of the Bayeux Tapestry. So do you want to quickly mention what that is? I've
Yes.
actually got a picture of part of it.
pull up a picture. So in the aftermath of the Norman Conquest, there's a lot to explain. It's a very complicated event, and the new ruling classes of Normans are trying to establish this story for the people of England, not only so that they know it, but so that it establishes a legitimacy of their rule. And so to a generally illiterate population, the way to do that is to create images. Basically, not to belittle them, but basically the Bayeux Tapestry is a large narrative cartoon. See, and it tells the story. And it tells the story briefly in Latin text at the top as it goes along, but you don't even really need that. If you can basically follow, frame by frame cartoons along the entire length of the tapestry, you can see the story of the Normans and their right to rule and their, William leading them to come over here. And again, it's not the entire story. There may have been some parts on the tapestry that are depicted that are not necessarily 100% factual, but it's certainly the Norman perspective of how they went about it and the right that they had to do so. So yes, obviously the tapestry is going to be like that's the last episode, right? It's the legitimization of the act.
Yeah, or maybe it could be the frame to the.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Someone's doing the tapestry and then they go back into the tapestry.
Yeah.
That would be really fun. All right, producers out there, get in touch with us.
Just call us. We'll be your historical advisors.
gkyle@brunel.edu.
Exactly. Now, before we move on, I am curious about did you mention how the tapestry was actually created and by whom?
So I had to ask, who do you think made the Bayeux?
Who I think made it? I think it was made by probably by a Norman artist with English embroiderers.
Well, who do you think commissioned it?
Probably Odo, William's half-brother.
I agree.
Because he was an important part of William's efforts to conquer England, but he wasn't preeminent, and yet he is preeminent in the tapestry.
Mm-hmm.
And
if you look at him in the tapestry, he has the nicest outfits.
He does.
Interesting.
And it is the
It
is the Bayeux Tapestry because it was in the Bayeux Cathedral, and who was Bishop of Bayeux? Odo.
Okay, so that makes sense. Yeah.
It measures right.
It measures right to go into that cathedral. Yes. Into the nave.
Because there was some mystery, right, about where it originally, or what it was intended, or where it was intended to be.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's fascinating. All right, well, that is an excellent answer. All right, Marie, so if you could have a movie about a historic figure or event, what would it be?
I always think that's as interesting. I was going to say there was one, an English medieval queen, Matilda, that no one ever talks about, and she's cool. So I think she deserves more recognition. Also, there's no good.
Was that Alfred's sister?
I think so.
Alfred the Great, pre-Norman Conquest.
Yeah.
She was around in that period, though, right?
I think so.
If I'm remembering correctly. Yeah, she's very cool.
Yeah. I might be saying the name wrong. It starts with an M. But that medieval English queen that no one talks about, someone should do a movie on. So then people know her name. Because she was really cool and very powerful. I also think that there should be a better movie, or a movie, because I can't actually think of one, about the American suffrage movement. There's one called Suffragette that's about the British suffrage movement that has like Helen Bonham Carter, and it's really good, but like also didn't get a lot of press. But it has like a bunch of big names in it, so maybe it got more press over in England and didn't get a lot of press over in the United States. I don't know. But I think there should be one about the American suffrage movement, because there is not one.
That's a good point.
Yeah, that is a good point.
There is not like a good movie or a miniseries. I can literally think of nothing.
Yeah, and that's such a cool topic because there's so many women that, I mean, of course, people are probably aware, at least they have heard the names Susan B. Anthony or maybe Elizabeth Cady Stanton, but there are so many other suffragists, men and women, or women and men, I should say, and besides that, like Frederick Douglass, for instance, was also a suffragist. And someone we've talked about here and done a program about is Lucy Stone, and she was she was the first woman to attend college from Massachusetts in the United States, and she went to Oberlin College, and this was the 1840s. So, and she was either going to go to a school in Brazil because it was the only school that she could find that allowed women to attend, but luckily Oberlin College opened basically just in the nick of time for her to attend there, and she goes on to be an incredibly well-known suffragist, I mean famous really in America, yet her name is not really remembered by the general public. And one reason that may be the case is that she and Susan B. Anthony had a big falling out. And Susan B. Anthony wrote I guess a contemporary history of the suffrage movement. It was actually written before the 1920s, so the history wasn't quite done. But because she wrote that, and Lucy Stone did not want to be involved in that, that's sort of part of how her she kind of disappeared into histories. So
now, do we know if Lucy Stone wanted to go to that college because it was male and female? Because I'm under the impression that there are female-only colleges at that time. Because we have one here in Georgia.
Were they colleges or were they finishing schools in
There's
effect?
One in Georgia, Wesleyan College.
Not in the 18...
It was 1840s.
So it was in the 1830s.
Yeah,
and
what I
they
understood.
say that they're the first in the United States to give out degrees to women.
Okay, that's
I don't
true.
know. The way I'll have to
well,
check
you
my
said
research,
Massachusetts, though, right?
She was the first woman to go to college from Massachusetts, but Oberlin College is in Ohio, and I understood them to be why don't we just do a little, let's just do a little Googling.
Do the Google.
Do the Google. So I know that they were one of the first colleges to be co-ed, but also...
because the one in Georgia was just women.
Just women.
It was
so
not
Oberlin
co-ed,
College
so it could have been because it's co-ed.
Was Oberlin established from the beginning as co-ed?
Yes, it's the oldest co-educational liberal arts college in the United States, and well, it's hard to breeze through all the
right.
text,
I wonder. It's interesting. From the larger here's how we view history perspective. Talking about there is no good movie about the U.S. suffrage movement, and I was like, well, what about so and so? I remember, no, that's British.
Yeah,
that's British, and it seems like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but America sees the suffrage movement as Elizabeth Cady Stanton and these women. It seems like, from my limited perspective in Great Britain, when they think of the suffrage movement, they think of the suffragists.
Not necessarily, because they have Emily Pinkhurst.
They do.
And
That's
there's
true.
a statue of her right outside Parliament. They very
But they seem to have. It's in all their shows, right? It's in their movement is in Downton Abbey. They've got movies about it. They've sort of embraced the fact, we kind of beat you all up. Sorry, excuse me. We quite beat you all up. Sorry about that. Here's some movies and statues. We were wrong. Apologies.
Yeah.
Whereas in America, it's like, yes, Elizabeth, Susan B. Anthony, she sure is good. Now shut up.
I know. I don't know. I don't
I'm
understand
trying to
what
think
that
of
is.
like shows that feature American suffragists.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm honestly having a hard time.
Right.
Think of any?
I thought, oh well, Mary Poppins, they have a whole like separate, and I'm like, that's set
British.
in Britain.
Yeah.
Even one of my favorite old television series, folks, the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, which are super fun if you haven't seen them. I was like, but there's a scene in that. It's like, no, he's actually in London and he falls in love with a suffragist.
I
Oh,
can
my
think
goodness.
of one instance. The Samantha movie, the American Girl doll movie,
Yay.
Samantha. Her Aunt Cornelia is a suffragist in America.
Oh,
Good job.
and what's that movie with a musical number? You know what I'm talking about?
The musical?
No, it's not a
Are you
musical.
talking about Thoroughly Modern Millie, perhaps? Does that
No.
have anything? No.
Okay, can you give us a little more than the
I
musical?
can see the scene in my head, but I can't remember
Can you
the
describe the
lyrics.
scene?
They're a suffragist and they are in sashes and they're walking around and it's a very proper husband who's embarrassed that his wife has adopted this insanely radical opinion that women should vote.
That sounds like
Maybe it
Mary
is the
Poppins
Music
to me.
Man.
It might be the music.
It might be the
Man.
Music
Maybe.
Man.
We'll have to figure that out. But ultimately, there are not enough suffragists
No.
in our
Yeah,
movie.
bottom line.
Not enough representation of suffragists and like being like, you know what, women wanted the right to vote
Yeah.
Yeah.
in America.
Because I am the resident expert on Juliet Gordon-Low, I also think that her story and the story of the
Yes.
Girl Scouts, like
Yeah.
I don't think there's a bio flick about Juliet Gordon-Low or the Girl Scouts, but that would be so much fun too
Yeah.
because she has such a whirlwind of a
She,
lifetime.
yeah, I was gonna say that's not a movie, that's a miniseries.
It really
for her.
is. It
should
really
be.
is. So
Do the Boy Scouts have a biopic?
I don't know.
I don't think they
Because
do
that would be
either.
cool too, because a lot of it leads to obviously the Girl
I'd-
Scouts. So
I'd rather see Juliet Gordon-Low, to be honest.
yeah,
I
I
think-
mean, well, there's a lot you can learn about the Boy Scouts through a movie about
Yeah,
the
exactly.
Girl Scouts.
She's just more interesting.
So JM says
in,
Girl
in
Scouts.
my
yes.
opinion, yes, she's just more interesting.
It'd be so cute.
Than Baden Powell.
Yes, Baden Powell.
Powell, excuse me.
I
yes.
know. Yeah, there's.
Just
I
think
mean,
about, if you're a producer out there, just think about the amount of money you would get from Girl Scout troops going
Right,
all to the movie
right.
theater
Come on.
to see the movie about Juliet Gordon-Low.
You can make a fortune just in selling cookies before you go.
oh
in.
my goodness. Yes.
And more coming out.
Yay! Yeah, so that would be my pick. I also
good pick.
totally agree with Normans and suffragists
Yes.
and queens we haven't heard of, like
Yes.
Queen Matilda. Aw, James says my girlie has been in a Daisy and is now an ambassador. Oh, that's so cool.
Nice.
That's awesome. Well, very good. Okay, we have another question. Sweet Geek asks, what happened to opium dens? Was it something the Women's Christian Temperance Union eradicated? I do not know the history of opium. I mean, could you give us like a bit of in a nutshell, like when was it popular or used? I don't know what the
Yeah.
word is, but
So, I mean, I'll answer the question first by saying
Yeah.
I don't know when they went out of style.
Maybe they're still here and we just don't know.
They-
Yeah,
well,
right.
I think probably not, because I think opium, especially in terms of the medicinal version laudanum, was very common in the late 18th century and early 19th, and it was a newly imported substance. You could not even drug substance. And remember, this is way before the days when this stuff was regulated or there were safety labels and anything
This
like
is
that.
the day of Coca-Cola having Coke in it.
This is before. That was the glory days,
Yeah.
right? So here's a substance that you can purchase in a store that relaxes you. There's psychotropic effects. I mean, it's a drug high, right? And I think, especially in, say, the Enlightenment era Western world, it's the first one that is commonly available that you can get that has these effects. And it is, of course, incredibly addictive. It is incredibly addictive. And the fact that medicine, doctors and apothecaries discovered its uses and used it for a lot of different things too, kind of exacerbated the issue. So people got addicted to it. They, high and low, rich and poor, got addicted to this stuff. And the opium dens are places where people could go and purchase some and just basically take it and then just hang out there until they sobered up and went home. Sometimes they didn't sober up. Sometimes they just ended up living there or mostly living there. And so it very bad effects. Basically, it's hard drugs for the late 18th, early 19th, and moving on a little bit into the 20th century. But by the time you get to the 1950s and 60s, there's a lot of other drugs that are available that can do the same thing. And basically, just as they got able to crack down on the opium trade, all this other stuff flooded in. So, it's opium, I don't think, is quite the thing that it used to be. But it was, again, very common medicinally, well past, up to and well past the Civil War.
Well, there are still opioids given in medicine today.
Yes, that's true. Yeah.
For painkillers.
So those, they sound similar, but they are derived from a similar.
Yeah, opiates and opioids are derived from opium.
Wow. Yeah. So.
And laudanum was basically just liquefied opium.
Oh wow. Okay. And laudanum, that was used to do what exactly? Like just calm a patient?
General cure-all.
Yeah.
Painkiller.
Okay. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it kind of gives you that, and yes, it was a common ingredient in a lot of the snake oils and things, because when you took it, it created this laid back euphoric feeling, right? And so, the medicine's working. Medicine's not working, maybe I should take a little more.
Right.
And again, this is before there was any sort of regulation. This was all over the counter.
Yeah.
Right? It was over the counter. Buy it at the store along with your bags of salt and barrels of pickles. I'll also take a gallon of laudanum, please.
Wow.
I've also seen if you ever go back and read old medicine recipes, it's interesting what they gave children.
Oh, do tell. What?
There's one that is particularly coming to my mind, and it was like a children's kind of like, if your baby's colicky and doesn't want to settle down, just give them this and it'll make everything better. The thing that it was like 75% alcohol.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
You just make your baby drunk and then they'll sleep. Yeah.
Yeah.
That'll
do the
work.
trick.
It worked.
Wow.
How can you argue with the results?
Yeah, so the medicine was just 75% alcohol.
Wow.
Well, and again, scientific studies for the effects of this sort of thing were slow in coming.
Right.
Until the 1950s and 60s, people recommended smoking cigarettes as a healthy alternative to all those sweets.
Mm-hmm. It soothes your throat.
Yeah.
It kills the nerve endings.
Oh man, this is making me think yet another great program would be just all of these things that we didn't know were bad.
Yeah, and like you pointed out, Coca-Cola had cocaine in it to start with.
Wow. It's fascinating. JM is curious to know, what was, they say was, but I think people still drink absinthe. I don't know what absinthe is exactly. I'm not much of a drinker, but...
Very strong alcohol.
Okay, and was it popular during the only association I have with absinthe is Moulin Rouge, the movie, because I know they drink it in the movie.
I mean, it's got a lot of different ingredients, and it's very minty, cough syrupy, and yet highly alcoholic. I guess. I don't know.
I'm gonna do a little.
Is it? Don't you have to prepare it a certain way?
Oh yes, yes.
There's a certain way of preparing.
You can't purchase absinthe. It's something that you have to create in your alcoholic laboratory.
According to
bar.
good old Wikipedia, it originated in Switzerland in the late 18th century and rose to great popularity as an alcoholic drink in the late 19th and early 20th century in France. So Moulin Rouge.
Yes, exactly.
Particularly among Parisian artists and writers. That's funny.
Yes.
And the ingredients are wormwood, anise, and fennel. All right. Cool. Wow.
The history of alcohol is fascinating. In the United States, one of the things that begins to lead to the importation, exportation embargoes that the colonists try to put on Great Britain so that they can assert their rights and things is Madeira, which is a specific kind of sweet wine that comes from the island of Madeira, which was held by Portugal. And many of the founding fathers, including especially George Washington, loved Madeira. I mean, seriously, and not to get drunk, but that was their flavored drink, right? The same as we drink cold tea or a Coca-Cola today, they had Madeira, and Madeira was incredibly popular. And so when trade starts to get cut off and they decide, well, we're not going to import anything, and remember, the way the colonial mercantile and financial system works, technically by law, you couldn't buy Madeira from Portugal. Some merchant in England had to go and purchase the Madeira, bring it back to England, and then you were only legally allowed to buy it on a British ship that came from England to sell you the Madeira, which of course made it much, much more expensive. Why not just have a Portuguese ship dock in Boston and buy it there? Because that doesn't fit within the British mercantile system. All those economic things start to pile up, and then boom, have a glass of Madeira, declare independence.
That's also fascinating to just think, like, what were the drinks of choice of the founding fathers and all these?
Madeira, coffee, tea, more Madeira. Right.
I think, and this could be, I saw it on the internet, so this might not be true.
Well, this is on the internet.
That's true. So, but it was like a bill from like the founding fathers after one of the after some meeting where they had just like one of the continental conferences, and they went to a tavern and they ran up an enormous bill. Like they drank a lot.
Oh yeah, I've seen those. Like 36 bottles of Madeira, 12 bowls of punch, 6 gallons of rum.
That.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's so cool to have that.
We should.
They
you know
partied.
What? Write that down.
Yeah, for real.
Alcoholic consumption and trade in the colonial and early independence era of America. I will be happy to do that.
And then there's some of those like famous taverns. Is Green Dragon?
That's in The Hobbit.
Green Dragon.
There's a dragon one that founding fathers were at.
In Philadelphia? The one that's in Philadelphia?
Yeah.
I don't know. We talked about that tavern
famous
before.
Taverns as well.
Founding Fathers Tavern, Philadelphia. Let's, the internet's an amazing thing. Yeah, City Tavern is apparently.
City Tavern.
I think it's cooler.
Which is called City Tavern because the city owned it.
Oh, really?
Yes, it was an enterprise by the city of
actual
Philadelphia.
Public house.
Yes. They basically
really
they purpose built the building to be an inn and a tavern, and then they basically licensed out, okay, you're going to take care of the rooms for rent, you can, again, and pay for the privilege, right? You can run the alcohol, you can prepare the food, but it's the city tavern.
That's really cool. Clavion is back. Hey, Clavion.
Hey.
Good to see you. They say every time I come here, I can never predict what people will wear.
Neither can we.
Yeah, right. So, goodness, JM says, my husband's grandma swore by rubbing certain things on baby's gums.
I have also heard of this.
Yeah, right. That's funny. All right, so let me check. Oh, and Sweet Geek also said there's a movie called Iron-Jawed Angels about Alice Paul. That's a British suffragette, as they were called in England. So I haven't heard of that, but thank you, Sweet Geek. So at least there's one movie about the suffragettes over in England.
Well, that makes at least two, because there's one.
Two, yes, that's right.
Suffragette.
Yeah. So we gotta work and we gotta find some movie producers, y'all.
We do.
So, I love the historical shades. Yeah, right? Thank you, JM. Yeah, unfortunately, I can't wear my shades. I can't see the screen. So, we got about 10 minutes left of Lo-Fi history. So, if you do have any questions for us, go ahead and chat those. But I've got some other fun questions, some if you could questions. So, I thought this one would be interesting. So, if you could have two historic figures from any time period meet, who would they be and why? Why would you want these two historic figures to meet? Take a second, and I'll remind our folks that...
Now, are we disinterested third party watching them meet, or are we all three sitting around a table?
I would say disinterested third party watching.
Okay, that makes that's different.
Unless you have a great answer that you would want to facilitate a conversation. But y'all, so just to remind folks that have joined us a little bit later, we do have a free live stream tomorrow with Glenn that's going to be about European martial arts. So that's going to be really fun, and that's tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern on our YouTube. If you're not subscribed to our YouTube, please make sure you are. And then, of course, we also have our members live streams that are every Friday. And if you're not a digital member, it's super easy to become one. I will actually put a link in the chat to become a digital member. And digital memberships, you get access to our digital member live streams every single Friday at 2 p.m. You get access to all of our past live streams as well. And it's only $3 a month. At least, or $35 a year. You know, if you can give more, we certainly appreciate it, but we want to make it affordable for absolutely everyone. So I'm going to put that in the chat. If you are not a digital member, please do consider becoming one. All right, got your answers?
Yes.
All right, let's start with Marie this time.
I think it'd be interesting to put Elizabeth I and Elizabeth II in a room together.
Oh, that's really good.
That's good. That's good. All right, but what do you imagine that being like? What do you think they would have in common, or maybe?
Well, because they're both queens of England.
Yes.
Queen Elizabeth II is the longest reigning monarch. But I was also thinking, because I thought, oh, they'll get along and they'll be great, it's like a family reunion. And then I was like, oh no, that probably is not going to go well, because Elizabeth I is at the dawn of European global expansion and colonialization, and Elizabeth II really oversaw the breaking apart of the Kingdom of Great Britain into the Commonwealth, where you have a lot of different nations. So I feel like it would also be very interesting to see how that happens, because I feel like Elizabeth I would not be very happy about, like, you lost all of our land.
But Elizabeth I didn't have it yet.
It's true. So
They were just a piddly little kingdom on the edge of Europe.
it's true, but she also, you know.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I love number one, right? But that would be good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, because you have Virginia, which is named after her. So
Yes.
it's starting. It's
starting.
But they don't have all of it. So I feel like it'd be interesting, because it would be like, so what happened? Well, we had it all. And then you see, that was a bad idea.
So you don't think they would get along?
I feel like they would in some regards, and in other regards they would not, because there's a 500-year age gap.
Is there?
About.
We're talking about Queen Elizabeth II. It's probably only more like 400-year
Maybe.
age gap.
Well, because if Queen Elizabeth...
That's a mean joke. I love number two more than I love number one.
Really?
I
Yeah.
realized today, because I was like, because Betty White just turned 99 years old, right?
Oh yeah, that's right.
So then I was thinking, like, how old is Queen Elizabeth? And how old is Prince Philip, her husband? And I went to go look today to see how old Prince Philip was. And he is 99, and he's going to turn 100 on June 10th.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and Betty White is actually older than Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II.
Wow.
Because Prince Philip is
Not by a
also
lot.
older.
Yeah.
She's
Yeah.
like 94? 5?
Something like that.
Upper 90s.
Yeah.
JM,
Who would win?
Who would win in what?
Who would win in a fight?
Elizabeth II or Elizabeth I?
Yeah.
Well, is Elizabeth I like 400 years old in this
Yeah.
fight or no?
No.
When are we?
No.
When are they needed?
In the prime of their lives.
Tomorrow?
I don't know who would win in a fight.
I don't know. That
I feel
would be
like
good.
I feel like I'm gonna go with number 2. I'm gonna
All
go
right.
with Elizabeth
Yeah.
II.
All right.
Because she had some military service.
That's
there.
right.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
That's right.
JM says, what about Queen Victoria and Elizabeth I and II? That would be a party.
Yeah.
They
Wonder
kill
how-
each other.
Do you think
Maybe
so? They
not.
would.
Want to be in charge.
Yeah.
And Elizabeth I would say, well, I have precedent because I was first. And Victoria said, well, I reigned over the greatest golden age. And Elizabeth II would say, yes, but I ruled over more people for longer than either of you together.
This is true.
And I don't know.
Also, Elizabeth II has knowledge of the other two, where Elizabeth I does not have knowledge of the other two.
That's
This
true.
is true. This is true.
And if you actually think about it, Queen Elizabeth II was born very, very close to when Queen Victoria died. So she knew people who knew Queen Victoria.
Right.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
absolutely.
Like
Good
her
point.
mom, her grandma, like they were all knew Queen Victoria. So I think she has a very good idea of like an intimate history of family stories of like, oh, Queen Victoria, Grandma,
Right.
she did these things.
Yeah.
You know,
a good
family
point,
stories as you have.
That would be really fun.
Yeah.
Now, I do have to make a correction, Sweet Geek. Thank you for your correction. Alice Paul is an American.
She is American?
She's
Okay.
an American suffragist. So at least there's one movie that we now know of, Iron-Jawed Angels. That's a pretty cool title. Iron-Jawed Angels. Yeah. Alice Paul. So, an American suffragist. Sorry about that. Thank you for your correction, Sweet Geek. All right, Glenn. So, if you could have two historic figures meet, who would they be?
Mine's not nearly that exciting. I chose Abraham Lincoln and Thomas Jefferson.
Oh, okay. Now, talk to us about what do you think they would connect on or agree on?
I don't know, but I know that they would talk about a lot of different things. And I think that's why I would want to see it happen. Not so much to see what they would connect on, but to see what they themselves would want to talk about. I'm sure the issue of slavery would come up.
Right.
The security and future happiness of the United States would come up. You know, in effect, Lincoln is the one with his leadership of the United States during the Civil War that made manifest the words that Thomas Jefferson wrote in 1776.
Yeah.
So they both have the same ideals. Some had more opportunities to achieve them than others. And they were probably the two greatest intellectuals to ever sit in the, to sit in the White House. And Lincoln greatly admired Jefferson, but he also saw the flaws that Jefferson exhibited as a person, as a slave owner, as this man who encompassed the dichotomy of what it was to be America. And continues to, I would argue, define it. But to see them have conversations, because Jefferson was an excellent listener and Lincoln was an excellent storyteller.
Yes.
And I think they would amuse each other.
Oh, that would be fascinating. Oh, man. If only. Maybe we'll have super advanced holograms one day that will take all the primary sources
That's right.
and give us
And
the
then
best.
compute what would happen.
Yeah, there are bots that can write entire television episodes now, right?
Right, yeah.
So we just put all of Thomas Jefferson and all of Abraham Lincoln into a bot and let them write a conversation.
Oh, that would be terrible. That would be terrible.
That'd be really.
That'd
That'd be something.
Yeah.
That'd be something.
Well,
I think it's also interesting because Thomas Jefferson kind of the Jeffersonian Republicans.
Oh, yes.
And
Yes.
then they went away, and then came Republicans in name, not necessarily in theory, came back with Abraham Lincoln. So technically, they are both Republicans, but very different.
Very different,
Now,
yes.
Marie, describe. So I was really fascinated to learn in our homeschool connection class. I learned a whole lot in our homeschool connection class that Marie leads, and I do all my things. But so I learned that I didn't realize that Jefferson was big on this idea of more of a rural community, farms, and more like self-sustaining.
Farms for every American as far as the eye can see.
And only farms.
Only farms.
Yes.
Every family gets a farm.
An agrarian republic.
Wow. Yeah. And
Where people work in the field during the day and then read Aristotle in the original Greek at night by the fire. Yes.
Thomas Jefferson's dream.
Now, are there still connections between like the republicanism of Lincoln that is connected to Jeffersonian republicanism, or do they kind of only share a similar name?
Got to remember that Jeffersonian Republicans eventually adopted the name of Democrats and were the foundation of the Democratic Party.
I didn't.
Which
realize that.
then evolved into the thing that the Lincolnian Republicans were established to counteract, which was the sustainment of a slave-based rural and agricultural economy.
Oh, wow.
The parties switched names.
Yes.
Like, wow. Yeah.
2, maybe 3 times.
Yeah. Well, even more.
Because they keep the same ideology throughout. They just change what they call themselves.
I see.
Yeah.
I see. Well,
So-
still, that would be a fascinating.
Yes. So I think it's
comparison.
interesting because they're both technically Republicans.
Yeah.
And
In
they both
name.
believe in the sovereignty of the people and the democratic process whereby the greatest ideas of the American dream may be embodied and manifested through the voice of the people.
But they do it in very different
They do it in very different ways.
Yeah.
Who are the American people? How do we make sure their voice is heard? When their voice becomes cacophonous, what must you do to bring it back into order? Big questions.
Big questions, relevant questions.
Yes.
Yes.
But speaking of questions, thank you all for your questions today. It is 5:02, so we are going to call it a Lo-Fi History. This has been fun. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. This is every Tuesday at 4 p.m. We are your source for history education. JM says thank you for what you all do, and that I want that farm. And David, our friend from Wales, he says I need to work on my timing.
Yes, you do.
That's all right. If you want to go back, you can always rewatch our live streams on our YouTube channel. We've got so many. We have so many now. So I do hope you'll join us tomorrow at 2 p.m. for our European Martial Arts live stream. Again, that's 2 p.m. tomorrow on Facebook Live and YouTube Live. And then again, Friday.
That's Eastern Standard Time.
Eastern Standard
For
Time.
you people in Wales.
Yes. Tim says thank you. You're very welcome, Tim. Brenda says what an interesting time today. So glad you joined us. All right, y'all. We will see you soon. Oh, Tim's from Manchester in the UK. We have an international audience.
Wow.
That is so neat. Awesome. Well, we hope to see you very soon in the chat. All right, y'all take care. Bye.